Hello, I'm Brittany Homer, and this is Raising Today's Kids, a Project Stand podcast. In episode 2, I spoke with Jenna Erickson, where she talked about the role of moms and how important they are in helping their kids thrive online. And in this episode, I am joined by Tim Rarick, where he is going to talk about the importance of dads. What I really appreciate about Tim is that I've seen him put into practice the things that he talks about. In our conversation, he mentions a survey where fathers were asked questions about how they viewed their role as fathers and how they viewed fatherhood in general. And he said that 99% of them agreed with the statement that being a father is a very important part of who you are. But at the same time, over 1/3 of those also agreed with the statement that you aren't terribly necessary or even important in your child's life. That is so sad to me that so many of those fathers don't see how important and necessary they are. Well, Tim is here to set the record straight. Dads, you are terribly necessary and important in your child's life. Your role is irreplaceable. And for kids who have an imperfect dad situation, Tim gives hope about ways to fill that gap. So I'm so grateful for the role of dads, for all those dads who take their role seriously. And I hope this episode can help you in those efforts. So let's just start with a little introduction, who you are and how you got involved in this topic and why it has interested you and drawn you.
Oh boy, where do I begin? I was born in 19, I'm just kidding. So I would say I did schooling. That's kind of maybe first where I officially got involved. So my undergraduate degree was in human development and family studies at the University of Utah. My plan from there was to go to grad school, get a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And I applied to 5 or 6 programs and decided to choose Kansas State University. And they have a really good MFT program. So we went there. And while I was there studying marriage and family therapy, I had the opportunity to be a TA for the most popular professor on campus. And she had 2 sections of lifespan human development, and it was 500 students each. So she had 1,000 students per semester. And after doing that for a semester, she said, I'm going on sabbatical and I'd like you to take over one of my sections. And then eventually I took over both. So yeah, I started teaching, and then my department chair and everybody else says, you need to be a professor. I'm like, no, you understand. I barely graduated from high school because I was such a goof off. So I shouldn't even be here. Speaking of fake it till you make it. So towards the end of my master's degree, my wife and I felt like maybe we should just keep going. So I did a PhD, and they offered me a very enticing situation at Kansas State. They said, if you stay here, you can keep teaching. We'll pay for your degree. And it was such a good situation. So I learned that I loved teaching, and as much as therapy, probably more than the therapy thing. And I liked research more than I thought. So I finished my doctorate degree there which was similar to my undergrad, marriage, family, human development. And I've been a professor at BYU-Idaho in the same field. I'm the program director. I have been for a few years now. I've been here for almost 14 years. And one of the areas I focus on is parenting, and the other one would be child and family advocacy. Those are my 2 areas of emphasis. And the advocacy stuff really got me involved in anything that was threatening the well-being of children and the family unit. I'm going to skip a ton of detail, but in short, I met some people who were involved with an NGO, non-governmental organization, United Families International. We said, hey, what if we start bringing students to the United Nations? So I've been bringing students to the UN during the Commission on the Status of Women since 2014. And the first time I spoke there, I was asked to speak. They said, what would you like to speak on in a conference that is on gender equality and women empowerment? And you're one of the only males, and some of the women there hate men. So would you like to speak? Sure. So I said, I'm going to speak on father-daughter relationships. And I remember one of the women who asked me to speak said, well, you're brave because, that might not go over well. It went over really well, and I can't take all the credit for it, but it went really well. And since then, I've been involved with things pertaining to fatherhood, fatherlessness, which is, I think, one of the biggest problems in the world today, and it has been for quite a while. And then I've been involved with many other nonprofits, everything from Educate Empower Kids to Fight the New Drug, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. So those are all more technology and sexual exploitation, but I've been involved in other nonprofits that are threatening the well-being of the family through other means, whether it's poverty or abuse or something else. So I have the fortunate, job hazard of never being out of job because the family and children, their problems don't seem to be going away anytime soon. And I have the, I guess, not so envious task of taking on almost any, or trying to take on almost anything that is a very divisive, polarizing, sensitive issue, and trying to navigate both sides or every side of that in a way that is both compassionate but also truthful. And I think some people tend to err too much on one side of those things. So that might be too much of a background. But one more thing. I serve as the chairman of the board for the Idaho State Department of Health and Welfare. It's one of those things, and Brittany, you know this probably as well, if not better than I do, is that when a door opens, you walk through it and then a bunch of other doors open and then you don't plan it. One of my favorite lines from the movie Amazing Grace, which is the biopic of William Wilberforce.
That's my favorite movie ever.
Really? Oh, okay.
Movie. I love it so much.
It's one of my favorites all time. My students in my advocacy class, which is the senior level upper division class, they have to watch it for their final and then do this paper connecting the class concepts to the movie and the movie to the concepts. And then they have to cite sources and everything. But there's this fantastic line that really resonates with me. When William Wilberforce is sitting out in his yard, this is, older England. He's out in his garden and he's looking at spider webs because he had this great political career, and all of a sudden he found God, and his servant comes out and says, "Have you found God, sir?" And he ponders, and then Wilbur, as they call him, he responds, "I think he found me." And I would say a lot of this stuff, I wasn't intentionally seeking it out. It mostly found me, and I usually have to be willing to say, okay, here I go. And then I got to meet the likes of you and Valerie, and it's just, you can't script this stuff. It's just been a blessing and a burden. Not you being the burden, but you know how it is, blessing and a burden.
It's clarifying that.
Yeah. Now the work we do is a blessing and a burden.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I've always, ever since I heard of your advocacy class, I've always wanted to take it. But now knowing that you study Amazing Grace, I just even more. I was thinking about how I first met you and actually how I first heard of you. I think I had heard of you through a couple of acquaintances, and I even watched a recording of yours of a presentation that you gave. But then it wasn't until we were at the UN together that my first year, when I was a newbie, you were a total veteran. You knew what you were doing and were just a pro at it. But I was this newbie, and on our panel that we spoke on together, I kind of got chewed out at the end. I got yelled at for just what I said about defending parents and the role of parents and everything, which is a story for another day. But I remember a colleague of yours approached me afterward, and I must have looked panicked. I must have looked deer in the headlights, because she just came up to me and she said, "Do you feel safe?" And I was like, should I not feel safe? I was like, what is this place? Where am I? And anyway, it turned out to be an amazing experience. But I think that you must have seen more potential in me than I felt that day, and in our organization here at Project Stand, because we connected about getting interns from your university, and they have been such a blessing to our organization for the last year. And they've been such an incredible asset. So anyway, I'm glad that we can keep the connection going. And I'm just learning so much from you and what you teach. And I've heard you talk about fathers a lot. And I never get tired of it. And so that's why I invited you on here today to just share the role of fathers in raising kids in a digital world. What role do fathers play? So we're talking about how, at Project Stand, we believe technology is amazing. We love it. We know that it has the power to do so much good, but we know that there's huge risks. So from your perspective, what would you say are your biggest concerns for the kids who are growing up today?
Oh, boy. Well, it's hard not to talk about these things. By the way, before I address that question, I remember that experience at the UN very clearly. I still tell that story today, not because it was scarring or anything, but it's just indicative of what happens. And sometimes, sadly enough, when you talk about sensitive and polarizing topics, people will choose to be offended. And I think you handled it well, and it was a good, I guess, baptizing experience for you. Anyhow, so when talking about the concerns about technology, it's really hard not to come across as a boomer, because you and I are probably more on the digital immigrant. I call children who were born after See, the first smartphone was 2007. Netflix came on in 2007, the same year. Not first smartphone, first iPhone, because most people who own smartphones own iPhones. But that's a pretty significant period in recent history. And so children who are born, after the year 2000, I call them digital natives, and you and I are more digital immigrants. So it's hard to talk about these things without sounding like a boomer or like, back in my day, we had to, we had the Pony Express would deliver our mail, which wasn't the case. But if I can just talk about technology and contrast it with today, because I really think these young people, and this is what I tell my students, they're kind of like fish in water who've only lived in water the whole life. And you talk about dry land, they have no idea what dry land is or water is because they're so immersed in it. In some ways, they've never stepped outside of the matrix, if I can use that analogy. Yeah. They don't even know what the matrix is, just like a fish doesn't know what water is until you've actually thrown them on dry land. They're like, what is this stuff? So just for a second, I'm going to give a little bit of 90s stuff. I think about video games. I grew up playing Nintendo and Super Nintendo, and then like the 16-bit Sega Genesis, but mostly the Nintendo. And if you wanted to play games, you had to own the game, or you could go to Blockbuster or some other rental place and rent it. Which, by the way, if you want to watch movies, once they come out on video, you had to go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, and you had to, if it wasn't available.
Looking for the movie that you wanted, yes.
Yeah, you're wandering around the store, and if you know what you want, if it's a new release and everybody wants it, they have several copies of it. But the worst thing was to walk up on the shelf, and all you saw was just the card. This is where it normally is, but it's all gone, sucker. And so if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. You had to go find something else. And you couldn't look up Rotten Tomatoes. You just took the plunge, and you're like, I'll just rent this movie, I guess. And this is what, maybe you go off of word of mouth. But the video games, you could only play them for so much, and then you get bored of it if you beat it. I remember beating Super Mario World several times. But if you didn't have another game, you just didn't have another game. Yeah, movies, you had to go to the theater, or you had to rent it, or you had to own it, record it off the TV. Music, I remember when CDs came out, I was thrilled. And I remember people who had a 6-disc changer in their car. I thought they're so spoiled and so lucky because they can listen to 6 different albums. Now I've got Amazon Music and Apple Music, and I can just say, Alexa, play. We have an Amazon Echo in our house. Alexa, shuffle music by one of my favorite bands from yesteryear, Dave Matthews Band. Shuffle Dave Matthews Band, or play 60s music, or play Justin Bieber. Like, we just play whatever we want, whenever we want. I don't have to wait. I don't have to be like, oh my gosh, there's a scratch on this CD.
Yeah.
So anyhow, and we have Netflix and we have Amazon Prime, but we can watch almost whatever movie we want. My wife and I, sometimes at date night, if we're not feeling very creative, we'll go out to dinner, we'll get some dessert, and then we'll go to my office because we don't get bothered by our teenage children and all their friends being over.
Okay.
What are we going to watch? But if we don't have a series we're watching, they're like, okay. Then we spend like 20 minutes looking at Rotten Tomatoes reviews. Like, I'm not going to plunge into this. If you want to watch your favorite TV show, it had to be, it was after school, like Saved by the Bell. And if once it's over, it's gone. You can't like rewind it. It's not on demand. Your favorite band was dropping their album, I would stay up late and go to like the Sam Goody store or something like that. And like, okay, the CD's coming out. Now my Amazon Echo flashes a light and says, an artist you are following just released a new album. Would you like to listen to it? I'm like, yes, I would. Do my bidding. Yes, I would. So one of my biggest concerns about this, because I've seen both sides of it, is that the younger generation is so immersed in instant gratification. They have impulse control problems. They have attention span problems. Patience is not a common thing. They have to work harder at it. And I can't say it's totally their fault. They're not just choosing to be this way. They're immersed in this water of technology where it's just every single one of those things. Like if I wanted to call my friend, get a hold of my buddy in high school, and he wasn't home, it's like, well, could you leave a message and tell Zach that I was trying to get a hold of him? Now it's like my daughter was texting a boy. Like, he didn't respond, and it's been a few hours. Like, he left me on red. I want to say, bro, You don't know what having to wait means. so, so I'd say what the research is finding is just that, is that it's messing up our attention spans, the way we learn. People are learning more digitally, which it can be a great thing. It has its pros and cons. So none of these are just negative, but I'm just talking about the concerns. The emotional regulation and how much it messes with our emotions. And I'm going to focus mostly just on entertainment and social media. That how much that messes with our emotions, and then the instant gratification. It can create this anxiety of like, I have to wait, and now I'm anxious, or comparing yourself all the time. I'm bored, so I'm going to medicate with a streaming series and just binge it. It's messing up sleep cycles, which is so important for mental and physical health and for academic performance. We know that it's impacting physical health. There's less activity the more people are on screens. So there's physical health. And when our children were growing up, we would open up books like Dr. Seuss and other books and read to them. I'm in Walmart or I'm in the park, and the 3, 4-year-olds are holding smartphones and tablets. And so that's getting in the way of the human connection. And that might be one of the biggest concerns I have, is that our ability to connect, relate to, and understand not just social cues, but people, and really feel this need to bond that is innate in every human being. That's getting disrupted too. So now that I've given you the history of where we were and where we are, and maybe offered too much negative stuff, that's probably my response to that.
Wow. Yeah, so true. Oh my goodness. That was a fun flashback though. Thank you for that.
Oh, yeah. I figured you could relate a little.
Yes, totally. I'm a child of the 90s too, and 80s. Okay, so one of our guiding principles at Project Stand is that parents are the most important protective factor for their kids. So I'm assuming that you agree with this, and I'd love to hear your take on that. Why are parents the most important protective factor?
Well, I mean, just from a practical standpoint, they have the most face time, or at least should have the most face time. And I don't mean iPhone FaceTime, the most face time with their child. So proximity, if the parents are living in the same home with the children, if we're going to make that presumption, which a lot of children are, then yeah, I would just say they have the most opportunity to influence the child. The parents are the ones who have the greatest influence on the child's development. I mean, Yuri Bronfenbrenner, who is an eminent psychologist, he studied systems throughout society, like what impact is having on a developing child, like the school district, the government, the local government, parents' work, the neighborhood, all these factors that influence a child's development. And then he summarized it and said the family is out of all these systems, the family is the most humane, the most economical, and the most powerful system known for building competence and character in a child. Not the school, not the government. He didn't say any of those. So that has the most potential, the most powerful, the most humane, and the most economical. So yeah, parents have the most potential to influence the child. But the more the parents are on the screens, they're eroding that potential or that superpower that they could have. It's almost like their kryptonite. And the more the child are on the screens, they're eroding that parent-child relationship. So yeah, I totally believe that parents should be the number one influencer. There's another social media term, the number one influencer in the child's life. And sadly, that's getting replaced more and more. It used to be where families, if they lived out in the country or maybe in a rural area or just a small town, that you could be like, oh, we can control the kind of peers our children have and the kind of influences, and we can control what kind of TV shows and movies come into our home. That was easy to regulate. It is so hard to regulate now. You can be off the grid and still have I guess you're not technically off the grid, but you can be out in the sticks and you could still have high-speed internet, and your child is being influenced by every idea, message, like toxic idea and message out there that they would have never been influenced by before all this technology boom. So parents have to be more vigilant today than they ever have been. They can't be passengers. They got to be in the driver's seat.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
anyhow.
yes. So, okay, so let's talk specifically about dads then. So, what is the particular role of dads?
Well,
And what's unique about that, about the dad role?
several things, boy, where do you begin? I mean, hormonally, fathers produce more like vasopressin than mothers do. And that is a hormone that's responsible for the like aggressive protective responses you might see if a child's threatened. So they've done some brain science research on this, and men do have this protective innate instinct, and especially when it's over their own children. They've done it with other children, and it doesn't kick in as strong, but it's when it's their own children, it kicks in even stronger. So fathers have, I'll just read a quote here. I think I have one from Linda Nielsen, who is a professor of psychology and women's studies on the East Coast. She was at Wake Forest. I don't know if she's still there. But she said, just talking about the father-daughter relationship, the father has the greater impact on the daughter's ability to trust, enjoy, and relate well to the males in her life. So for daughters, fathers set the stage for all future male relationships. For sons, fathers set the stage for how do I interact with the opposite sex, and what does it mean to become a man? Some writers, and I tend to agree with this, some experts say that going from girl to womanhood is more natural than it is going from boy to manhood. That boys need more guidance and guideposts than girls do to go from boy to man. And the fathers have the greatest potential. I always use the word potential because just because you have the greatest potential doesn't mean you're using it, right? They have the greatest potential to do that for a boy. I can zoom in on the son and daughter thing a little bit more if you'd like, but fathers they're unique in they kind of prepare their children for facing the world, where mothers prepare the children for interpersonal relationships better. And the mothers produce more oxytocin, which is like they sometimes call it the cuddle hormone, but it's more the bonding.
Yeah.
So you can just kind of see how nature and even evolution, if you want to use that source, has naturally evolved for mothers and fathers to have unique contributions to their child's development. But the analogy I use is like a spoon and a fork. They both can feed children. If I'm trying to feed my 13-year-old chicken breast, then a fork is going to be better. If I'm trying to feed her yogurt, then a spoon is going to be better. Right? Hopefully I'm not spoon feeding my 13-year-old, but you get the idea. So fathers and mothers do a lot of things the same, but there's enough difference that we can say that each, the mother and the father, contribute to the social, emotional, physical, cognitive, academic development in unique ways, similar to the fork and the spoon both feeding the child. But they have some, right? Because I guess there are some foods you eat, mac and cheese, it's going to work with a spoon or a fork. Yeah. But fathers do have some uniqueness, just like mothers do.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Yes. So let's maybe break it down. Like, what are some practical ways, and fathers are unique in keeping their kids safe online? Like, what are some things that they can do?
Some of these things are not what a lot of dads think. So when dads hear you're an innate protector, you have that instinct. They're like, yes, I do. Sometimes you'll see this come out in YouTube videos. I remember I've seen fathers who will take their son's gaming machine, like the Xbox or whatever, the PlayStation, and they'll run it over with a lawnmower because they're so tired of their son being on it for too much. And I think part of that, I can't call it all protective, loving instinct. I think part of it is just pride of feeling like you've been ignored so long. And so you're getting upset. And so this is your way of getting retribution, which is really toxic and unhealthy. Understandable, but not justifiable. Those are two different things. I've seen YouTube videos of a daughter who's been on her laptop too much, and the dad went in the backyard. And he's like, she's gonna start listening to me now. I'll teach her a lesson. He gets his rifle out and he shoots a hole through it. Then he returns it to her, and she's in tears. So you can see some of these protective instincts and these abilities gone awry, because any gift or strength can become a weakness.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry for the bad analogy, but Superman could really destroy the earth and take over, in the fictional world of the comic books, but he doesn't use his powers for that. He tries to use them for good. And so when fathers hear what the unique things they have, and in fact, maybe if you don't mind, I'll just give a little list of some of the unique things and then talk about how you can translate to technology.
Please, yes.
So fathers have a greater impact than mothers on their daughters in the daughters not being overly dependent on men, not abusing drugs and alcohol, and you'll see a correlation here with sons as well. Fathers have a bigger impact on the daughter's academic and professional success than mothers do. And so when I speak to this, I'm speaking to feminists, I go, hey, women empowerment, does this sound good to you? Get dads involved. Don't step on men to elevate women because it's not helping the young girls. Fathers have a bigger impact on helping the daughters less likely to be sexually abused, manipulated, raped, taken advantage of. Oh boy, eating disorders and mental health. Fathers have a bigger impact on the daughters than moms do. And we're starting to see some research, speaking of, that the daughter is less likely to be addicted to social media, which is a big problem. Boys tend to gravitate more towards the video games, even though they do have social media issues. And girls tend to toward the social media. And the wiring for males and females, it makes sense why they do that. But we're seeing with fathers being more involved, it can curb some of this addiction or this reliance on social media for affirmation, for self-worth, for a connection, for a sense of belonging. And again, the ideas I'm going to give are not as practical, or I should say, as logical as a lot of dads think they are. The dads think, oh, the reason why social media addiction goes down when I'm present in my daughter's life, because I take the phone when she's on it too much. And I say, you can't have this back until you shape up. That's actually not what happens that's effective. What's effective is young daughters and even older daughters want to know, am I worth something? And can I get along with boys and men? And they're looking for validation from their father, who is like the gateway into those relationships. And if he is loving and active and involved in her life, and he doesn't even have to bring up social media very often or smartphones, although he should. We'll talk about some practical suggestions for that in a second. But just that relationship being close and she feels secure and confident because her dad loves her unconditionally, and that doesn't mean he's permissive. Those two things aren't the same thing. She feels less of an innate need to go and try to find affirmation and validation from the online social media world, which those likes and those follows and those shares can be very addictive and get the dopamine going and start to get a false sense of, oh, I'm of value. And she'll be less likely to compare herself with those other girls and women online. So dad offers this buffering thing for her. And I would say, dads, rather than trying to correct over and over again, to think you're doing a lot of good, maybe you should connect over and over again for their daughters and their sons. Spend less time harping on the amount of time they're on their video games and on their phones, and spend more time asking them questions, listening to, learning from them, learning with them, spending time with them, doing things that they enjoy outside of screens. And actually, if I could just pivot to sons real quick, is that okay?
Absolutely.
When it comes to the sons, this probably is not going to be too surprising, fathers have a bigger impact on the sons. Sons are more likely to treat women and girls with respect when they have involved loving fathers. You're more likely to have boys who will grow up and share equally in family responsibilities, so egalitarian homes. You'll have boys who are more likely to do that when they become fathers. Again, we're trying to get all this gender equality going, and we do it in such ways that actually shoot ourselves in the foot. To try to feminize boys, maybe we just need to get more fathers involved and father figures involved in boys' lives, and they'll actually learn how to be more egalitarian naturally. Boys are going to have healthier views of masculinity. They're less likely to be involved in gangs and less likely to go to prison, because most violent crimes are committed by men and mostly by fatherless men. In fact, it's been said that prisons are just a holding cell for fatherless boys, and it's statistically true. So I guess I'll give you a quick example from my own life. I have a son who's 21. He's been into Fortnite for a long time. And Fortnite, you can play unless you don't have a good connection. But that's not like when I was growing up. You could play anytime, any place, anywhere, almost, except for when you're up in the mountains or, off in the desert somewhere. And I got so sick of his desire. In our home, we had rules of how many minutes a day you could be on screens. And we still do. He's now in college and he's not in the home anymore. But I got so sick and tired of him wanting to be Fortnite. And he would try to find ways to get around the rules. I think it was like 30 to 45. At the time when he was younger, it was like 45 minutes a day. He could do it after he finished his homework and everything else. And he kept asking for more time. And I tried the traditional approach, which goes against what I teach in my parenting class, which was more correction, more lecturing. And that just invites more resistance. But we think if I give this great lecture and go off, somehow the child's going to be like, oh my gosh, you never articulated it that way last time. And that extra 5 minutes of lecture you put on this time somehow changed my mind. Why didn't you go 5 minutes next time? Go 5 minutes longer. And we keep thinking if we keep going, it's going to fix it. But what we're doing is inviting resistance. The child doesn't think you understand them because you really don't, even though you think you do. So I finally backed off a little and I just said, you know what? I'm going to do a social science experiment. I said, Carter, you've been asking for more Fortnite time. My protective drive was doing this, was pushing it, but I had to channel it in a healthy way. And I said, for 1 week, if you're willing to do this experiment, you can have a blank check pretty much. You can play as much Fortnite as you want. You don't have to come to family dinner. You don't have to, and we do family prayer at home. You don't even have to come to that. You can, for a whole week, you can do whatever you want. But you got to keep track of your mood log throughout the day. Like, how are you feeling right now? You got to circle these things. And then just some small journaling. And he's like, I can do the small journaling. If I get, Fortnite, unlimited Fortnite. And I said the second week, and I can't remember which week was first, but the second week, you could only play the Nintendo Wii U, which was not streaming. It was just whatever you had on the Wii U. And you can only do it, I think it was 30 minutes a day. But when you do it, you have to do your homework first. You always have to be at family prayer and family dinner and family breakfast. So that's it. And I want you to keep a mood log as well. So at the end of both weeks, I literally had a clipboard with a survey that I created and printed off. I said, how close did you feel to your family this week on a scale of 1 to 7? And I described extremely close to not close at all. And I did it at the end of both weeks. And to his credit, he was honest. And he was very honest, almost brutally honest. And he was saying like 1s and 2s of how close he was to his family, how happy he was. He was not happy at all when he had this just constant pleasure stream, this constant dopamine. And he was honest, and his mood log showed it. And basically what I wanted was in a home where I can do this experiment, because when he's off on his own, I still have influence, but my influence decreases.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to feel basically what I would call the natural consequences of breaking natural law, the laws that govern your brain, that govern your relationships, that govern your learning. And I wanted him to experience it. And the fruits or the positive consequences that the research is showing that has on those things when you do regulate technology, when you are the master, not the servant of technology. And so at the end of the 2 weeks, he was like, oh my gosh, yeah. So I said, based on everything you've said, how much time do you think you want? And he was pushing for like an hour and a half a day on screens and Fortnite or whatever. And I said, based on the last 2 weeks, your experience, how much time do you think is fair? And he goes, I think I want to keep it at 45 minutes. Now this is an example. I'm not saying to everybody listening to this, you need to do this exact experiment and email me and I'll send you the survey that I created for my son.
I love it. I want this. This should be published. This is amazing.
But I wouldn't, like, there are some things I wouldn't do that experiment with. I wouldn't say, go watch pornography as much as you can for a week and then don't watch it for a week, because there's some things, the consequences are too serious and damaging and addictive that I wouldn't do that. But we can find ways to get creative. I guess the point is I give that example of what I also did in addition to that is I said, hey, Carter, can I play Fortnite with you? Blew his mind. And I stunk, and I still stink. If you've ever played Fortnite, you're out trying to shoot all these other people, and it's not gory, but you're trying to shoot all these other people. And it's like it's like Hunger Games in a way, last person standing. And I'm just hiding behind my son. I'm like, protect me. Like, he's now the protector. And that gave him a sense of like, whoa, I can. And I do think that's one of the reasons why that boys are so driven to like these action fighting games, is because this desire to conquer, to go on a quest, to save the princess, to slay the dragon, to be something more than they are. They get a false sense of that in a video game, of accomplishment. And so I would tell fathers, look at that desire to play video games in your sons from a different perspective, that there's actually a gift and an ability that's lurking there. It's just being channeled in an unhealthy way. And how can we put that in practice in the real world? So when I played Fortnite with him, I actually felt closer to him, and he he no longer can say, "You don't understand me. You don't even know." Because I've gotten into his world, like the Fortnite world. And I still, once in a while, will say, "Hey, let's play Fortnite." But I'm just going to be hiding behind bushes and you and buildings, and I'm dead weight. So, and I said, Carter, now you know what it feels like to be a father, because I'm just trying to, you're hiding behind me. You're dead weight. I'm just kidding. I tease him that way, but it gives this role reversal, and it also gets me inside of his world. And children don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And fathers, I think mothers get that better than fathers do. Fathers need to find ways to get inside their daughters and sons' world, to really understand them, spend time with them away from screens, and sometimes with screens, so they can understand them. And I always like to say, listen to and learn from and learn about your child. So the corrections do come, and they need to come. We need to have rules. We need to have times where we say, you know what? I think it's time to take a break. We need to take a break from technology for a little while. Not for punishment, but because I care about you, and I can see that, if they were just constantly eating chocolate and they were getting sick, I think we need to take a break. I'm not punishing you. The consequences of you eating so much chocolate is punishing yourself. So out of love, let's just scale back for a while and kind of get our bearings again and get our health back. So anyhow, those are some practical suggestions. I've been probably talking too much. Anything you want to say or ask about that?
That's great. No, you made me think about an experience with my own family recently. And my husband has started commuting to work. He travels quite a bit these days. And so my kids see him less than they're used to. And so I've been thinking about, with this talk about fathers and their importance and the role that they play, what to do when fathers aren't around as much, and when, or at all. My daughter, she's 17, and the other day we sat down with her, my husband and I, and we like to check in with our kids about their goals and see how we can support them, and, just about life and how they're doing. And one thing that she brought up is she said, "I want some one-on-one time with you, Dad." And I thought that is very wise of her to see that something was missing in her relationship with her dad, and that she had, she was vulnerable and asked for more. And I think a lot of kids maybe don't see that. They don't know what they're missing. And because she has that contrast of, I used to have more time with my dad and now I don't, she could see it more clearly. So what would you say to when a father isn't around, or isn't maybe as proactive as, a child might hope they would be, or as a mother might hope they would be?
Yeah, that's a tough situation, because there's so many different arrangements for fathers. There's fathers who, because of your husband's situation, he has to travel for work more than he would like. You've got fathers who are physically present, but emotionally and intellectually absent, socially absent. And then you've got fathers, and I've worked in the court. I've worked as an expert witness in the family courts, and I've had to see some pretty terrible things when it gets to custody battles. There's a lot of war going on. So statistically speaking, there's a pandemic of fatherlessness. So fathers are usually not in the home due to divorce, or they never got married, fathering children out of wedlock, and then they never married the mother they created the child with. So there's all levels of involvement in father arrangements that I would say the person needs to figure out where they're at based on their situation. So your husband's is different than somebody who's has secondary custody post-divorce, and they only get to see their children on weekends and then for several weeks in the summer. So I'll just speak to that one first. There's this tendency to overcompensate for fathers of divorce, where they feel guilty because not all of them feel this way, but a lot of them feel guilty. So they try to overcompensate when they are with their children. The term has become Disneyland dad, taking their child on these extravagant vacations, or trying to compensate with stuff and trying to compensate with fun, when really what the children need more than anything is your time and attention. What they want for dinner is you, not like their favorite restaurant. Yes, they do want that. But one child who went on a bunch of family vacations one summer with their dad, And then one night in the backyard, just laid on the trampoline looking at the stars and just talking, that child was asked, what was your favorite part of the summer? And it was that night. Um, it wasn't my child, but I'm getting choked up because I can just think of my own children. But it was that night when they spent time one-on-one with dad. So my first suggestion would be to custodial, like secondary custodial fathers, is that find ways to increase your influence by increasing your time and attention. And just ask yourself, what does my child need and how can I meet those needs, rather than what does my child want and how can I meet those wants? They will love you more by meeting needs than they will by meeting wants. And so when your daughter said, can I have some time with you? That's pretty intuitive and pretty wise. You're right. A lot of children need that and they want it, but they don't know how to articulate it and they can't figure out what is it that they really do need. Yeah. So in my home, I can tell when my influence is starting to wane. It's when I stop asking questions about my daughters and my son's friends, like what they're up to, how are things going. When I'm just not and you can, with technology, here's the blessing technology, you can be more present in your child's life if you don't have the luxury of being there physically. You can FaceTime them, even texting them, which is not ideal, but it's better than no connection at all. And so when I send some annoying GIFs or emojis to my children to make them cringe, deep down, they're cringing, but they're like, okay, dad's still connecting with me and he's being playful about it. I don't have to Venmo them money to make them know that I love them. So I would say dads have to speak the love language of their child. And I guarantee you it's not Disneyland, sugar, or screens or stuff. Even though that's what children want, what they really want is just you. They want your heart. They want your attention. They want you to be interested in their life. So fathers have to figure out where they're at on that level of involvement, like where they are, whether they're divorced fathers, or like your husband's situation. He just has to be more intentional and take where his situation is at and what can I do to improve it? What's the next step I can take? Because a lot of dads, what they'll do is like, okay, that's it. I'm going to be just this amazing dad and overhaul everything. And whoa. It's like people with New Year's resolutions. Make something that's measurable, that's achievable, that's realistic, and that can be a lifestyle change and not like a fad diet or I'm going to go work out 6 hours a day. That's not sustainable. So when dads want to make changes, then they say, what's the next good thing I can do that I can implement on a regular basis? And then after that, and that becomes part of your routine and your life, the next thing, what's the next good thing I can do?
Yeah. Yeah. So what if the dad is completely absent, not in the picture at all? What can be done for those kids?
Well, I do believe it does take a village to raise a child, even though the family is the best part of that village and this should be the most influential. But extended families can lend support when needed. I've spoken with mothers who do not have the father in the child's life, and I asked them, do you have any brothers that are good influences, that are uncles of the child, that could not be their father, but a father figure? Are there men in the community, in your local congregation, at church, at your work? Are there men? Pay attention to the men around you who are good examples that could be father figures. I had a student who was from Haiti, and she came to the UN with me about 5-6 years ago. And she grew up with an abusive father. And then he went out of her life. And then her mom remarried another guy who was also abusive. And so by the time she was a teenager, she hated men. All she saw was men just using women. And by the time she got to be 14 or 15, she met a man who was a pastor at a local congregation. She wasn't religious, but and I can't remember how she met. I think it was a friend, the daughter of, so she met a girl at school and her dad, she went over to the home. And this was a loving father involved and loved the mom. She'd never seen this before. And she was like, oh my gosh, this is even possible. She didn't even think it was possible. Fish and water. The water she was living in was in abuse, neglect, manipulation. And she never saw this before. And it slowly softened her. And this man became a father figure to her, changed her life. And then she changed her perspective, changed her heart. Then she came to the States, got a college degree. Now she has I think, 2 master's degrees. Um, she's married and has 2 sons of her own. And she's got a loving husband. And it changed the trajectory of that young girl's life, who hated men and did not have a good father. In fact, both the father and the stepfather were quite terrible. So I'm a big believer in positive male role models, and they can be found anywhere. Sometimes they're hard to find, but that's what I would say to moms is, are there men in your life that maybe you haven't even noticed that could be good examples? And of course, you'd want to vet them out. You don't want to just bring any guy in. And at least for the time being, you can point your sons and your daughters' attention to men who are good male role models and say, pay attention to this guy and how he does this. You notice how he sacrifices for his family. Did you see that man who just helped carry that baby stroller up the stairs from the subway, like in New York City? That's a man right there. Point out good examples that you see until you have a consistent good example. And look for them in media. I mean, you guys are all about using healthy forms of media. When we walk out of movies and the men are portrayed as buffoons and idiots and all the women are brilliant geniuses and they step on the men to elevate the women, my daughters pick up on that because I tell them to look for it. And I say, you look for anything that elevates women at the expense of men and vice versa. And let's talk about it. So I like to have, my children know I like to have philosophical conversations about movies. And they walked out of the Barbie movie and they said, Dad, we can't wait for you to see Barbie movie. And I said, okay, well, what do you mean? Well, I want to know, is it radically feminist? Is it healthy? What is it? And I said, well, I want to know what you think. So I watched it with them. I had all sorts of thoughts and I won't share them here. But I started by asking their thoughts because I want them to process it. I want to teach them how to think rather than just tell them what to think.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's maybe too many suggestions, but hopefully that's helpful.
No, I love that. I love those, all of them. Thank you. So if you could give any message to dads, what would you say?
That I guess if you feel like you've thrown away your last opportunity or last chance to be a positive influence in your child's life, I would invite you to seek out good media that actually teach you otherwise. There was a study that was done, and I can't remember how long ago it was, talking to they sampled or polled fathers, and they asked the question, they put a bunch of, how much do you agree with this statement? It was several statements. And I think it was about 900 something, it was almost 1,000 fathers in the United States. And they asked them, is there a father absence crisis in the US today? And 91% said, yes, we agree with that. Then the next statement was, all else being equal, men perform best as fathers if they are married to their mothers of their children. 81% agreed with that. I mean, assuming that nobody is abusive or committing adultery and there aren't some serious addictions, I would say 100% should agree with that statement because that's best for children. But the government should do more to help and support fathers. 2/3 agreed with that one. But the two things that I guess I would say the 3 that jumped out to me the most were, being a father is a very important part of who you are. 99% said yes. So that's a big deal. But when asked, you aren't terribly necessary or even important in your child's life, over 1/3 agreed with that. So you have virtually everyone saying, all the men in this study, close to 1,000 fathers, saying that being a father is a very important part of who you are. But then about 1/3 of them or more say that they're not terribly necessary or even important in your child's life. I would say those fathers who feel like that, I would speak to them for a moment and say that just because belief and truth aren't the same thing. Just because you believe it doesn't make it true. And I hope that you will go to other sources that are teaching you how valuable and important you are. And if your children hate you, then I would start with your own heart. Don't try to fix the relationship. Start with your own heart. Try to see your children as people who need you, with hopes, needs, fears, dreams, and desire that are as real to you as your own. Don't get caught in the shame cycle. The shame cycle never helps anybody grow. Um, I'll give you a Star Wars reference. Shame is episode 7. Kylo Ren gets sliced with a lightsaber, and his stomach is bleeding, and he's walking around like a nut job, punching his wound while he's in a lightsaber duel. Yeah, if you want to help a wound heal, you get it antibiotics. You create an environment that allows it naturally to heal. Shame is punching the wound. Mm-hmm. So if you're a father who's stuck in the shame cycle, I would ask you to get the help you need to get your heart right, to see yourself clearly, see your children clearly. And there's so many good resources out there that are inspiring for fathers. Jordan Peterson honestly speaks so well to men and fathers. I had the opportunity to hear him speak in person just a few days ago. And I would say 80% of the auditorium, there were thousands of people there, 75-80% were men. And you could say he's like the man whisperer. He's not the only one you should go to, but there's so many other sources out there that help fathers to see how valuable and important they are. And just like Kylo Ren's wound, a father's heart can heal if he creates the proper environment to allow it to heal, to let go of bitterness, to let go of pride, to let go of shame, which is a different form of pride. And don't allow external indicators to determine your level of success. Just because children may be making bad choices, or they may not like you, or things may not look like they're going well, that is not a measurement for success. A good friend of mine, Nate Mitchell, who works with troubled teens and their parents, and he's often asked how he thinks God will interview parents, and I just say how God will interview fathers. And his response is, I endorse wholly, so I'm just going to shamelessly steal what he says. And he said, I think when he interviews parents, he will not say, did your children all not do drugs? Did you make sure that they all loved each other? And did you make sure that they all went to college and they all became Boy Scouts if they're boys, and they all rode off into the sunset? I don't think he's going to ask, like, what did you do with them? Well, I think the question he's going to ask is, did you learn to love them? That's why I put them with you. Did you learn to love them in a very specific way? Did you learn to love the way that I love? And that doesn't mean that I don't have standards. And that doesn't mean that I don't teach my children, and that I certainly hope they don't do drugs and they don't get addicted to video games or social media. They never get sex trafficked. I try my best. But if anything becomes more important than that connection, than that love, than that relationship, then I've got it upside down. I think I might fail the interview. If I become a conditional parent, if I let shame win, if I let the things that I'm seeing in my children's life, and I start to forget it, well, they're making bad choices, so forget them. If I let that win, then I'll probably fail that interview. So my final point would be, fathers, work on your hearts, help see yourself and your children clearly, and then build the relationship. And then from there, spend more time listening and learning. And then you can teach. And then finally, what you do the least amount, I would say, would be correction. But that's an important. And the correction will be received so much better when those other foundational pieces are in place.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you. Well, this has been amazing. I have loved learning from you today. Thank you so much. And I guess I just want to ask one last thing, because we started by talking about all the concerns that we have about technology and kids growing up today. And we have this epidemic of fatherlessness. And, there's a lot of things that feel kind of down about the topic. But what hope do you have? What gives you hope for the rising generation and for dads?
Well, one of them is, I would say, the men that I have seen turn things around. And there's that story of that student from Haiti, where it looked like she had no hope at all. And yet there were good men out there that stepped up, and her heart changed, and it changed her life, and it changed the trajectory of her life. So I've seen many, many examples in my own students, because I've had thousands of students over the years, both at Kansas State University, because I used to teach there, and here, where their lives were changed by good men. And I've seen boys who've been rough circumstances, really start to change things. I've done work in other countries on this topic, and there are movements and men and women everywhere who are trying to do this. And that gives me hope. And I would also say that what gives me hope is, maybe it's an overused analogy, but you've probably heard the story of the man throwing the starfish into the ocean, where he's on the beach, and people are like, what are you doing that for? There's like hundreds, maybe thousands. You're never going to do all this. And he said, well, it matters for that starfish, as he throws it in, and it matters for that one. So I would say, rather than trying to change the entire cultural and social tide, we focus on the one, and we're one who influences one who influences one. You never know where that multiplier effect can lead. And even if you don't change the world, you can change a person's world. And so that gives me hope. And that person, who knows what they'll do. So there's always hope if you look for it.
Yeah. Yeah. You could be the next William Wilberforce that you influence.
Exactly. You just never know. And it will have a ripple effect, not just across society, but then across generations.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You were doing amazing work. And I'm so glad that you chose teaching as your profession, because you obviously have been able to influence thousands of students. And I see it in the interns that we work with and the things that they have learned from your courses. And it's been amazing. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Brittany. I feel very fortunate to be able to link arms with you in the cause. So you keep up the good work too.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.